Hi everyone. Today I'll be presenting a case study on Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi Knight who turned into Darth Vader, through the lens of borderline personality disorder, or BPD. The goal of this presentation is to examine Anakin's actions, motivations, emotions, and interpersonal relationships, and to show how they align with the DSM-5 criteria for BPD. By the end, we'll also briefly compare other potential diagnoses and explain why BPD uh, provides the clearest explanation for his behavior. So, Anakin Skywalker is introduced in the Star Wars prequel trilogy as a gifted Jedi with immense potential. He was enslaved at a young age with his mother, and he was trained under Obi-Wan Kenobi. From the start, Anakin forms intense attachments, particularly to his mother and later to Padme, who eventually marries. And they play major roles in his behavior throughout the series. His story arc, from a heroic Jedi to the Sith Lord, Darth Vader, provides clear examples on extreme emotional behavioral patterns, which are the key to understanding his potential personality disorder. And it's important to note that personality disorders are pervasive and inflexible. So this means that these patterns appear across most situations, not just isolated incidents or events of anger or violence. The DSM-5 TR criteria for borderline personality disorder, there's 9 of them, but you only have to have 5. So, Anakin exhibits many of these, which has shows that he has a strong support for this personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. So he exhibits the fear of abandonment. So he becomes desperate when he perceives threats to losing Padme. Unstable interpersonal relationships. So he alternates between idealizing mentors like Obi-Wan Kenobi and intensely devaluing them. So later on, he ultimately tries to, he goes against Obi-Wan when he's about to turn to the dark side. He has identity disturbance. So he has struggles to reconcile with his personal desires with the Jedi Code, and this is that internal conflict that we see between the light and dark side when he's trying to determine which side he wants to be on. He has impulsivity, so this is demonstrated in violent and destructive actions. So, like when he killed the Sand People in the Younglings, he told Padme instead of feeling remorse and guilt, he felt proud of himself in some way. Instead of, being like, I just killed these people, he showed that power. He really liked the power that it gave him. And then he has emotional instability. So he experiences rapid mood swings that we see later on after through those emotional attachments. And he goes from love and devotion to rage and despair. He has chronic feelings of emptiness, so that's why I was talking about he seeks that power to fill those emotional voids. And then he has intense anger at inappropriate times, so he has violent outbursts, and this is shown repeatedly throughout the films. And he does meet that's 7 of the 9, so again, this is a very strong potential diagnosis. So some key evidence from the films, media, and all that kind of stuff. Here's some specific examples. So with his fear of abandonment in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is haunted by the visions of Padme dying, and he doesn't really know how she's going to die. He just sees her in those moments where she's going to die. So that fear of her dying drives him to make impulsive and destructive decisions, and this includes turning towards the dark side. because he believes only he can save her. So this is also when he starts to kind of go against Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan wants him to understand that there's more than one option to saving Padme, that he needs to stop and think, but he doesn't. He just thinks that only he can save her. And a quote is, "I won't let these visions come true. I must save her," which is from Revenge of the Sith. His impulsivity and anger. So in Attack of the Clones, he kills the Sand People who murdered his mother in a violent outburst. So again, that impulsivity. And then later in Revenge of the Sith, he massacres the separatist leaders and even the younglings in the Jedi Temple. So these actions show that he's impulsive, extreme, and emotionally driven with his impulsivity. And then with his unstable relationships, he idolizes Obi-Wan Kenobi, but later turns against him. So, and then part of this can lead to why his relationship with Padme oscillates between love and controlling obsession, which shows that instability in attachments. And then that identity disturbance and emotional dysregulation. So Anakin constantly struggles between the Jedi Code, his personal desires, and his obsession with power. And those can, to anyone, those can be kind of overpowering when it comes to handling all of that. And you want to have control over those decisions. It might seem like the code is trying to tell you to be one way, but your own desires are telling you to be another way, and that can kind of cause that stress and make him be impulsive, or make him have this identity crisis almost. His mood swings are extreme, and they're rapidly shifting from joy to rage, and this is often influenced by that fear of loss or perceived betrayal from Padme or Obi-Wan. And just a quote from Obi-Wan is, "You are the chosen one. You're supposed to bring balance, not leave it in the darkness." So this is when they are battling, and Anakin comes forth to Obi-Wan, and this is when he's on the dark side, and he is confronting Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is showcasing that his decisions did not lead him to the path that was chosen for him. And it showcases that Anakin didn't want that path for himself, ultimately through those impulsive decisions. And that fear of losing Padme. And that fear and the want of power really contradicted itself. And that is why that this potential diagnosis of borderline personality disorder is very prevalent, because you can see the two different sides that are kind of pulling at Anakin, and how he's trying to go back and forth to determine which one is better for him, but he can't really make that decision, so he just kind of goes back and forth between them. And this shows that borderline personality disorder across multiple traits of his life and areas of his life. So why this is not technically other diagnoses, Anakin's behavior could suggest other personality disorders, but to me, borderline personality disorder fits best when we examine his context and motivations. So regarding anti-social personality disorder, Anakin does kill and manipulate, but his actions are driven by fear, emotional attachment, and desperation, not a pervasive disregard for others or lack of conscience. Like, he does know that it's wrong, and he does understand, like with the Sand People, he knew that it was wrong, he knew that it was very impulsive of him to do it, but he still felt like he needed that power, that he needed to go and do that in that impulsive decision. Regarding narcissistic personality disorder, he exhibits some grandiosity, like believing he can save Padme and he's the only one, But this is situational rather than a chronic pattern of entitlement or need for admiration. So he doesn't need to be the hero all the time. Like, he just feels that way about Padme because his love and that growing love that they had, and that it is his duty to do it, but not in a narcissistic way, not in that entitlement type of way. He just sees it as he's her protector. He needs to save her, and he's the only right choice because he thinks that he's doing what's best for her. But in the end, he ultimately is hurting her. When talking about obsessive compulsive personality disorder, or OCPD, Anakin is not rigidly perfectionistic, but or rule bound across all situations. Again, with that conflict between the Jedi Code and ultimately turning towards the dark side, he had that conflict of those rules for the Jedi Code. It wasn't very easy for him in those types of situations to kind of stay put in that sense. His behaviors are guided more by that emotional impulses than rigid control. So a lot of emotion is causing him to make these impulsive decisions, these emotional outbursts, the motivations that he has, and that's why he has all these, because that's why it fits more with borderline, because it's not these rigid pervasive aspects. It is the aspects for borderline. And just the borderline personality disorder is the most consistent explanation, because it's he's pervasive and flexible patterns of emotion and behavior. That's what he exhibits. So just to conclude, Anakin Skywalker demonstrates borderline personality disorder traits across nearly all aspects of his life, from his interpersonal relationships to his emotional regulation, impulsivity, and sense of self. And my case study illustrates how fictional characters can serve as effective tools for trying to understand personality disorders, because I guess it's a little more meaningful to us just because we find it entertaining. So we're going to remember those odd behaviors that they have, or we can see emotional regulation and motives a little differently than maybe a book character or a political figure, because we watch movies, especially like trilogies or multiple movies like Harry Potter. You can see those kind of emotions and motives and behaviors there in front of you. So I think that this is a great way to try to understand not just personality disorders, but any type of disorder, and there are movies made about certain mental disorders, and I think that's really awesome to showcase those and see how that works. But back to Anakin, while his extreme behaviors are heightened by that storytelling, the underlying patterns like the fear of abandonment, unstable relationships, identity disturbance, and that impulsivity and emotional dysregulation, they align closely with the criteria in the DSM-5. The DSM-5 is a great book to help understand all these disorders, especially personality disorders. And just a quote that he had was, "I will do whatever you ask to save those I love." And that showcases that he really was just doing all this stuff for his love of Padme. And he did at some point love Obi-Wan as his mentor, but then that emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, and all that kind of stuff just kind of made him jump back and forth between what was right and wrong, or what he should do, what he shouldn't do, what he wanted to do, and all that kind of stuff. And then I just got my information from the two movies, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And I used the DSM-5, and then I also used Borderline Personality Disorder, Etiology and Treatment by Joel Paris, and then I used Borderline Personality Disorder, A Clinical Guide by Gunderson and Links. Thank you.